small town of Denton, in the March fog, Denton High School became a fortress of whispered fears one ordinary Tuesday morning. The ancient edifice of learning, with its hollow hallways and fluorescent tomb lights, fell silent when he appeared, a specter from another realm, shuffling across the grounds in garments not meant for this world. They called it a lockdown, that modern ritual of survival, but the students of Denton High understood the deeper truth as they huddled in darkened classrooms, their breath shallow, their young hearts pounding like tribal drums. It began with a distant hollow sound, metallic and rhythmic, like skeletal fingers tapping on the doors of the afterlife. Bang, bang, bang. The percussion of lockers being struck reverberated through the corridors, growing inexorably closer with each passing moment. The students exchanged glances of pure animal terror, their eyes wide in the darkness as the sound approached their sanctuary. Bang! 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 Louder now, closer, each impact sending tremors through the floor beneath their feet. Something was moving through the hallway, methodical and patient, testing each metal door as it passed. Mrs. Winters pressed a trembling finger to her lips, though no student dared make a sound. They had transcended fear and entered a realm beyond it, a place where the human mind splits from itself in desperate self-preservation. When the banging reached their classroom door, a sound like judgment itself demanding entrance, even breathing ceased. The handle rattled, turned, tested against the lock. A low moan filtered through from the other side, neither fully human nor entirely otherworldly. Inside the classroom, backpacks were clutched like shields, pencils gripped as pathetic weapons. For 93 minutes, each second stretching into infinity, they waited, while outside, men in uniforms hunted the intruder. The phantom wanderer, they would later learn, was once a man named Elias Chambers. 86 years of life had worn away his memories like water-smooth stone, leaving only the polished surface of confusion. He had escaped the confines of Shady Pines, that warehouse of forgotten souls a quarter-mile distant, where attendants with plastic smiles and cold hands kept the dying from troubling the living. In his clouded mind, perhaps Elias was returning to the schoolyard of his youth, or perhaps something darker called him there, some ancient appointment that only the dementia touched can perceive. The authorities, with their logical minds, would never understand the cosmic significance of his pilgrimage. When the all clear finally sounded, releasing the captives back into the illusion of safety, something had changed in Denton. The students emerged blinking into the harsh light, their innocence forever dimmed, having glimpsed the terrible truth that the barriers between the worlds of the coherent and the confused were far more permeable than anyone dared admit. Elias was returned to his keepers, and the official record called it a wandering incident, but the children of Denton High knew better. They had felt the cold breath of chaos against their necks, had seen how quickly the veneer of civilization could crack, revealing the screaming void beneath. All because an old man with vacant eyes had crossed an invisible boundary that separated their ordered world from his disordered one. And sometimes still, when fog shrouds the athletic fields of Denton High, students swear they can see a figure in white shuffling between worlds, seeking something only the lost can name. On that particular Tuesday in October, when autumn's golden light slanted through oak branches and cast long shadows across the playground of Santa Rosa Academic Academy, no one suspected that innocence would be shattered at precisely 1:35 in the afternoon. The children had spilled from their classrooms moments before. Among them was 10-year-old Michael Thorne, a quiet boy with observant eyes that often saw what others missed. It was those eyes that caught the movement at the fence line where the school property met the tangled woods beyond, a figure partially obscured by shadow and something glinting in the sunlight, something that looked unmistakably like metal. The playground monitor would later recall how Michael's face drained of color before he ran to her, his sneakers slapping against the asphalt. "There's someone by the trees," he said. "They have a gun." The words hung in the air for one terrible moment before being carried away by the wind. Then the machinery of protection ground into motion, wheels turning that could not be stopped. At 1:35 p.m., the first call went out. Officer Delgado was 3 blocks away when his radio crackled with the dispatcher's voice, unnaturally calm as she spoke the words that sent a chill through his veins. "Possible armed subject at Santa Rosa Academy." Inside the school, the afternoon tranquility shattered like fine glass as the principal seized the microphone. Her voice, normally warm and reassuring, now carried the brittle edge of controlled terror. "This is a code red lockdown. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." In the second-floor boys' bathroom, 11-year-old Nathan Cooper sat frozen in the last stall, his small frame perched on the toilet seat, feet drawn up so they wouldn't be visible beneath the partition. Too far from his classroom to return safely, he had made the instinctive decision to hide where he was, following the first rule of survival that had been drilled into him: stay out of sight. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with malevolent intensity. The dripping faucet marked time like a metronome. Nathan's breath came in shallow gasps, each one carefully controlled, lest it betray his presence to whatever evil might be stalking the hallways. 27 minutes into his solitary vigil, the bathroom door creaked open. Nathan's heart seized in his chest, a trapped animal desperate to escape its cage of ribs. From his hiding place he could see nothing, but his ears strained against the silence. The soft squeak of rubber soles against linoleum, the whisper of fabric as someone moved cautiously into the room. Nathan pressed his fist against his mouth, teeth digging into knuckles to suppress the whimper building in his throat. The shadow paused, as if sensing his presence. The intruder took one step toward Nathan's stall. A distant shout, a police officer calling to another, and the shadow suddenly retreated. The bathroom door swung open and closed in a rush of displaced air, leaving behind only the drip of the faucet and the thunder of Nathan's pulse in his ears. When officers finally discovered him 40 minutes later, his legs had long since lost feeling, but his eyes had gained something that childhood should never know. Parents, alerted by the modern town criers of text messages and social media, descended upon the school in a panic. They gathered beyond the police tape, a shifting mass of terror and prayer. The officers reviewed the security footage, their eyes narrowing as they studied the grainy images from the playground camera. There, at the fence line where Michael had pointed, a figure moved in and out of frame. But what glinted in the sunlight wasn't the barrel of a weapon. It was the metal badge of the school's newly hired groundskeeper, inspecting a broken section of fence with a pair of pruning shears in hand. At 2:48 p.m., the all clear was finally given. That evening, as parents held their children close and whispered reassurances, the town of Atascadero seemed to exhale collectively. The threat had been illusory, a misunderstanding born of heightened vigilance and a child's innocent mistake. But if it was all a misunderstanding, then who was in the boys' bathroom with Nathan? In the hollow corridors of Obsidian Middle School, where fluorescent lights cast their sickly pallor upon institutional walls, Wednesday began as Wednesdays always did, with the clockwork predictability that lulls the living into complacency. Children shuffled between classes, their laughter echoing against metal lockers like the tinkling of distant wind chimes, unaware that fate had marked this particular day for a visitation of terror. It was precisely 11:30 a.m. when the veil between ordinary existence and nightmare tore open. The cafeteria pulsed with youthful energy. Hundreds of souls gathered to feast, their collective heartbeats forming a symphony of innocence. An 8th grader glanced toward the east entrance doorway where a shadow materialized, a dark figure slipping through, bearing at his hip the unmistakable shape of death's favored instrument. Gun! The word tore from her throat, a banshee's warning. There's a man with a gun! Time froze, then shattered. The primal scream of collective terror erupted as the herd scattered, young bodies colliding in desperation. 2 teachers on lunch duty immediately radioed the front office. Within heartbeats, a disembodied voice filled every corner of the building. This is a code red lockdown. This is not a drill. Children who moments before had been consumed with trivial concerns now faced mortality's grinning visage. Teachers, those shepherds of young minds, transformed into guardians against darkness, herding their charges into corners where shadows might hide them from prowling evil. Doors sealed and fortified against the coming storm. In room 213, Mrs. Patterson's domain of literary exploration became a bunker of whispered prayers. 32 souls and their protectors pressed into a closet designed for mundane supplies, now a sanctuary against unspeakable horror. Beyond the school's boundaries, blue lights sliced through morning air as modern-day nights converged. Parents, those who had sent their precious ones into what should have been safety, gathered like mourners at a wake not yet begun, some clawing at police barriers with the desperation of the damned. Inside the labyrinth, as black-clad figures with shields and weapons swept room by room through purgatory, Officer Diaz, a man who had stared into humanity's abyss for 20 years, felt ice form in his veins as he studied the glowing screens. The harbinger of this apocalypse was revealed, not a monster born of humanity's darkest impulses, but Detective Harrington, whose presence had been twisted by circumstance into a phantom of fear. Detective Harrington had arrived early for his presentation, and used his department-issued access card to enter through the side door, planning to check in at the office after parking his car, being in plain clothes rather than uniform, with his service weapon visible on his hip. He had inadvertently triggered the panic. It was the perfect storm of miscommunication, explained the principal afterward. The Criminal Justice Club advisor was out sick that day. The front office staff hadn't been updated about the presentation. When doors opened and light returned, something had changed within the halls of Obsidian Middle. Something had been taken that could never be returned. Innocence had fled, replaced by the knowledge that safety is merely an illusion, that normality hangs by the slenderest of threads. The children of Obsidian Middle School learned this truth on an ordinary Wednesday that became extraordinary. They learned that the most terrifying monsters are not those that lurk beneath beds or within closets, but the possibilities that nest within the human mind, possibilities that, once awakened, can never truly be lulled back to sleep.